If I could make a comment as well, we run programming where we do, people are mandatory clients, if you will, and they do very well. And this area is in the domain of employee assistance programming, where people basically have run out of everything in terms of, from the employer's point of view, they could fire this person. And they basically, there's a contingency that said, but if you have a substance use problem or a mental health problem and you get treatment, we'll hold your job for you. And actually, under those conditions, people go into treatment. They often go in begrudgingly and resentfully, but they do very well. They do as well as people who are volitional clients in treatment or involuntary treatment. So we have these examples of where mandated treatment works very well. And it's interested me, how can we do so well there and we do so poorly in the other mandated circumstance in the criminal justice system? And so one of the things is actually the people, it maybe touches on your quote, Dr. Maté. One of the things in these employee assistance programs is people are very motivated because they have something to lose. They don't want to lose their job, but there's a lot of other stuff they stand to lose because it's humiliating to lose your job this way. And also there's a part of these individuals that you can reactivate, and it is their desire to do well and to actually be exemplary to their families and their friends and stuff. So if you can get that motivation going, you can turn it around. So actually, it matters not very much to me when somebody comes into treatment. I want to know their motivational level, but I'll take all comers, actually, in treatment. Mm-hmm. And you can work with that very effectively. And so the evidence in employee-mandated treatment programs like this is very high. Actually, Correctional Services Canada has some very good best practices programs. And in a lot of ways, people who get into those programs, the problem isn't the jail. The problem is what happens when they are returned to the community, where there's not enough uptake and support. But yes, there are ways that you can use situations benignly. But if the situation is actually that people are in really not very supported human environments, just the basic conditions of life are very difficult, or as I hear some of my colleagues in correctional services say, that a very important program they have is literacy training, and that the budget for that is getting squeezed. And that so actually teaching people, a lot of people in jail, I mean, we have to realize what we're talking about here. They don't know how to read and write. And you want them to go out and get a job. So jail is a great opportunity to get people literate, actually, and there are people who want these services. So, again, the issue would be what's the design, and what's the investment, and what's the goal, and what's the strategy. So if people have to be in jail, by all means, have a compassionate, humane logic and see this person as somebody with a rehabilitative potential and invest in that rather than looking at, if you will, the amount of time that they're going to be locked up. Because the evidence is that, you'll get a difference going when you do that. The other thing that needs to happen more is the link between the service provision of people in institutions and the community needs to be made tighter. So there needs to be a seamless plan so that when people actually get back on the street, the uptake is really important, because a lot of people recidivate or relapse to drugs within the first 30 days, right? I mean, it's just that simple and that dramatic a problem. So, again, those transitional periods, we know they're the high-risk periods, and we know there are strategies that, if we did them, would be more effective. So there are ways we can do this smarter, and I do appreciate you bringing up this point.
You speak about the correctional service. The correctional service, and I always think what an irony that word is, because to correct something, if you look at the roots of the language, means to make it right, to make something right. And the people that end up under the wing of the correctional service are people whose life have been severely troubled. I mean, according to all the evidence. Corrections would be an opportunity to make it right, but we don't do that. And we confuse punishments with making right. So the correctional service really ought to be called the punitive service. It's a more accurate description of what, for the most part, they do. And it's not because they don't have the potential. It's just because they don't have the understanding, the funds, the support. It's not how it works. I'd like to see a correctional service. Very much would like to see a correctional service. We could use one.
Thank you. Senator Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentations. When I listen to what you've said, it's obvious that your focus is on drug use and addiction. Obviously, you've lived the life of that, and you know the reality of it. And as with all of us, I mean, we commend you for what you do. And for those of us that aren't involved, have those problems, we thank heavens, because you've seen what that does bring to families and society. It's the worst. But just to sort of draw this back to Bill C-15, Bill C-15, as you know, is focused on drug trafficking and drug production, with a particular emphasis on organized crime. And I think for all of us as legislators, the whole drug trade, drug situation is a very difficult one to find answers, magic answers. We're trying to make incremental improvements. My understanding is that the direction of Bill C-15 is to make an attempt to improve the current situation so that we will create communities and a social environment where those who do not have addictions today, are not subject to drug use, will not find themselves drawn into the web. So the feeling would be, when we, for example, listening to evidence yesterday from Mayor Fassenberg from Langley, British Columbia, and he spoke about the realities of drug production in his community and of houses that were used for drug production, marijuana production, going up in flames, battles between rival drug gangs, weapons that are involved in that, and the harm and the fear that creates for communities. And he's literally pleading with us to do something about it, because the current system is not curbing, not coming close to curbing that kind of activity. Similarly, and all of us as parents could relate to this, we do not want our youth in situations where drugs are being pushed on them. And I know in this civilization today that's difficult to achieve, but for that reason in Bill C-15, there's provision that does create stiffer penalties for drug pushers who are in and near schools and influencing our children. So I say all of that as a backdrop that to a large extent you're dealing with drug addiction and problem after it's happened. But we as legislators have a responsibility to try to prevent as best we can for others, to prevent others from being drawn into the system, being drawn into those issues. So I would ask you, I would direct this perhaps to you, Dr. Maté, would you not agree that doing everything that can be done to curb drug trafficking and production in our communities is a worthy goal? We can debate how perhaps that can be achieved, but would you not agree that that's a worthy goal and that that in fact is the main focus of Bill C-15?
Senator, thank you for the question. I think that you and I agree on the goals. It's not a question of divergent goals here. It's a question of how to get there. Now, there is, in my profession at least, there's a demand that what we do is based on evidence. I'd like to see that applied to your profession as well, which is, say, the political world. And if you look at the evidence, what's been suggested here has been tried elsewhere. It's not somebody who just didn't, it wasn't some creation of some Canadian genius who came up with more punitive, more restrictive laws. This has been tried elsewhere in the world. In the United States right now, they're backtracking from it. They're backtracking from it because the jails are overfull. California jails now, the gyms are now housing, instead of exercising people, they're housing bunks, 3-level bunks. They're running out of jail space in the States. In California, they're desperate to let people go out of their jails within the last couple of months. Because of the mandatory sentencing regulations, their jails have been overflowing, crowded, unhealthy, and why don't we learn from the example of our neighbor to the south? The United States has got something like, I forget the exact figures, but something like 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's jail population. Those are the statistics, something like that. I'll have to look at the exact figures, but it's in that range. We have their evidence, so that I understand the frustration and anguish of the mayor of Langley.